Big day, Mickey Mouse Club. No, this is the sports show. As presented by the Denver Post, I'm Woody Paige, and my special co-host today, renowned columnist from the Colorado Springs Gazette, Paul Klee, is joining us. Born and raised in Colorado. How long have you been in Colorado Springs now?
I've been back in Denver for 4 years now. This is my fourth Broncos season. Yep.
So you've never covered the Broncos when they were
They're always good.
Lousy.
They're always good. It's the easiest team around here to cover.
When I came in '74, I got like 3 years of really bad football. And I had watched the Broncos before I got here. My second column was, I don't know what you people are thinking, but your team sucks. And I got into trouble with John Ralston right away when I arrived in town. But see, you're only here during the good times. When it turns bad, which could happen.
It certainly could happen at any time. But since I've been back, they've only won. And people say, why don't you write more hockey and more baseball? And I say, well, they're not in the playoffs every year.
Yeah, and nobody really cares, do they? Let's get into the big stuff. So Paul's going to be with us for the next hour, and we're going to talk a number of subjects, including the Broncos, and we're going to talk a little bit of hockey. We're going to talk some college football, a lot of subjects on the table. The big stuff today, Manning or Osweiler. This is not going to go away. It's not going to go away when Kubiak even makes an announcement. It's not going to go away till probably the end of the game when they play, but it's going to be with us for the next 2 weeks, and we'll discuss that. The coaching carousel, they call it Black Monday, but it's not like the day after Thanksgiving. And a lot of coaches are being fired or threatened to be fired. One might be traded, one has resigned, one was retained. It's kind of interesting what's going on, and we've got a hockey player in Denver that has scored his 600th goal. That's only been done 19 times in the history of the NHL. Whether or not that makes you worthy, 600 home runs in baseball before the steroid era guaranteed you a spot in the Hall of Fame. The 600 goals guarantee you a spot in the National Hockey League Hall of Fame. What gives the Broncos a better chance at playing in the Super Bowl? The number one seed or Peyton Manning's return? Paul, we start you with that one.
I think that's a good one. You got to go Broncos, right? I think it's the number one seed. You look at obviously the New England has been the problem, and they're 1-3 on the road in their last 4 road games in the playoffs. So the Pats haven't been very good in the playoffs on the road, which sounds bizarre, but they really haven't. And as you and I know, the last couple of years, you know a lot better than I do, it is also the coldest place on earth in Foxborough. And I don't think that's a place that you'd want to go. However, I think this first game is going to be enough of a challenge before thinking ahead to the AFC Championship game.
Well, we'll discuss it a bit later, but ESPN and its analysts who have been political analysts and sports analysts are giving the Denver Broncos a 34% chance of going to the Super Bowl, of winning the Super Bowl, going to the Super Bowl. Yeah, 48% chance of going to the AFC Conference Championship. Those numbers are so skewed because they are the number one seed. So obviously being number one seed, I don't think they could have won at home, and I still don't, or on the road with Brock Osweiler as quarterback, because there are other issues at work here. The Broncos have serious deficiencies on defense now because there are at least 4 starters that are injured. And I'll mention them: Damian Stewart, DeMarcus Ware. We don't even know where his situation is. Sources close to him who are, let me see how to put this, sources close to Ware who are familiar with his way of thinking told me on the elevator with kids in their hands, and they're related to him closely, said he'll be fine, he'll play. He told his family he would play in the first playoff game. So that's my sources for you, and they're familiar with
those
the
are
way
good
he's thinking.
sources.
Brandon Marshall played 3 plays on Sunday, then walked off the field and said, I can't play. Chris Harris had a dangling arm, and he told me afterward that under normal conditions he may not have played, and he kind of blamed that on why he didn't come up with the interception. So I think I'm going to go with the Peyton Manning return, because we saw a totally different Broncos team, and you talked to players in the locker room, and the players don't want to say it publicly, but they welcomed him back. They liked that he was back on the field. One guy told me that the moment he stepped in the huddle, they all stepped up their game. So I understand, without the number one seed, they wouldn't get anywhere. I think without Peyton Manning, they wouldn't get anywhere either. So.
I think this team has enough flaws that we've seen already that they need a little bit of mojo, some kind of magic, and I think Peyton brings that. And we agree on that. Peyton needs to be the starter.
The one time we saw him throw deep in the second half, though, he was off 4 or 5 yards. It was reminiscent of what we saw earlier in the year. Can he throw deep enough and accurately enough so that teams don't cheat up on him like they were doing by the time the Kansas City game came around? Or is that going to be a continuing problem for Peyton Manning?
I think if you had the other guy, being Brock, who, if he had been completing those deep passes and had been successful with that, I think that would be more of an issue with Peyton. But Brock hasn't been an accurate downfield passer. And I think that
people would disagree with you on that, though. I'm trying to think, but they think of him as
certainly
a deep passer.
And I'm a big Brock supporter. I think Brock has a chance to be a very good player. And I do think Brock will be the quarterback here next season when Peyton Manning is done, in Denver at least. I think that he was 3 for 6, speaking of Peyton, on passes over 10 yards the other day. And all 3 were to the right side. So I think that's something to keep in mind. I'm sure other opponents will know that. But I go back to, I think, the best rule of thumb in sports, and that is you do what the opponent doesn't want you to do. And I got the impression, especially in the Chargers locker room the other day, they didn't love the idea of seeing Peyton Manning out there. So 15 running plays called the other day, 10 passing plays called with Peyton. You're going to see them lean on the running game quite a bit.
Today in the Colorado Springs Gazette, you wrote a column, dueling columns. Mark Kisler wrote, and he and I talked about it, argued here off the camera, behind the camera, in front of the camera. He believes that Brock Osweiler should start the first game, bring Peyton in relief. I don't quite know what that means. Okay. Sorry, Brock, it's the end of the third quarter. You're ahead 27-10, but we're bringing in our closer. You tended to go the other way. You said Kubiak take a bow, but now go out and win a Super Bowl or win playoff games. Who do you really think should be the quarterback in their first playoff game?
I do think it should be Peyton Manning because there are enough holes elsewhere that this team isn't the 2012 Broncos that, of course, lost to the Ravens on the Jacoby Jones play. However, I thought that team was the best in the NFL, and it had very few holes. We've seen this team is very flawed. I think it's going to take something extra, maybe a little mojo, Manning mojo, to get them past some of these better teams in the AFC. It's not an indictment of Brock because I thought he was actually okay the other day. I didn't think he was terrible. Averaged, was it over 10 yards per pass attempt? But
you're sitting here going, you're a Brock supporter. You said, I didn't think he was terrible. That's not really a positive description of a guy. Oh, you weren't terrible.
The turnovers, I would say, were not entirely his issue. But I do think it needs to be Peyton Manning. And the other day isn't really the reason for that. I think, especially with the teams that they could face, if that's Kansas City, and he's had ownership of Kansas City through the years. He's played very well against Pittsburgh through the years. The Patriots are a different story, but at least you get them at home, and you know what he's done to the Texans over time.
It's got to be Peyton Manning because of his leadership qualities, and I keep saying, and you're talking about a little bit extra you're looking for, Manning mojo or whatever. I'm looking for some leadership on the field. You talk about Brock didn't play terrible. He didn't grab the throats of his teammates and say, hey, let's stop turning over the football. I'm responsible too, along with the rest of you. He didn't show me any leadership. He showed me that he was a quarterback. He's a young quarterback. He's been around for a while, but he didn't show that leadership capability. Nobody on offense was showing it. Nobody on defense, really. Von Miller's not a leader. Chris Harris is a leader, but he's playing cornerback. He's not really. DeMarcus Ware's a leader, but he can't stay on the field. Brandon Marshall's somewhat of a leader, but he wasn't on the field. You need somebody with leadership, somebody you can call a captain. David Bruton Jr. can't play. There's not a real captain on the field now. Maybe TJ Ward, but he's worrying about himself and his injury. I think that it's got to be Peyton Manning. Mark Kisler is totally wrong. I've told him to his face, so I'm not speaking behind his back. He's totally wrong. If you want somebody in relief, if Manning, because he says, well, Manning can't hang in there for the entire game. Well, that's the point, is let's see him get him ahead 17-3 or something. Then you can bring in Brock and say, protect the lead, run the football, But you don't want it to go the other way. I'd rather see if Manning can last a whole game. I think the only chance you do have of getting that 34% to the Super Bowl is Peyton Manning at quarterback. Of the three players who received MRIs yesterday, Chris Harris, Stuart Ware, we talked about, which player do they need the most? Which player can they least afford to lose for the playoffs?
Do we get the DeMarcus Ware from weeks 1 through 8 or the DeMarcus Ware of the last 7 weeks? Because if it's the early DeMarcus Ware with all those sacks, and I believe he was leading the NFL when he was injured or became more injured and stopped playing in Indianapolis, then that's the guy I want because you have two guys now outside. If it's the guy we've seen the last couple of weeks, I think it's Chris Harris. I do, because of what we saw in Pittsburgh. And if you do get the Steelers, the big concern with that, to me, is you never want the best player on the other team. And Pittsburgh would have the best player, and that's Antonio Brown. And if you were to go into that game in the divisional round without Chris Harris, I think that would be a very bad formula.
Yeah, I want Chris Harris to light up, but he's not going to be a problem. He's going to play. He's got a deep bow bruise. If it had been a shoulder separation or something, then I'd be concerned. DeMarcus Ware is worn. He's worn out. Even with the knee injury, he's worn out, just like he was last year. I think you can get enough play out of Shane Ray on that side. He had a half a sack or something in the last game. I want Brandon Marshall back in the lineup because not only can he cover tip passes, recover fumbles, the guy is a legitimate Pro Bowler. Should have belonged in the starting lineup in the Pro Bowl. Brandon Marshall is the guy that I think has the best opportunity to become the leader of this defense over Von Miller, who's worried about his. I mean, I heard him say leading in, and I like Von, but he said, I got to get my sacks up. He didn't talk about we got to win the game. He was talking about I got to get my sacks up. Rocky Mountain Men's Clinic. Check it out. Sexual issues can be the symptoms of other more serious conditions. You hear about this on television when they talk about side issues. Well, consider these: diabetes, strokes, heart attacks, high blood pressure, prostate issues, stress, obesity, and a variety of other issues. I have them all. They can lead to sexual problems. They can have a great and profound effect on you at Rocky Mountain Men's Clinic. With their equipment, with their PSA testing, they can all get you back into business, and it's not just about sexual health, it's about your total health. RockyMountainMen'sClinic.com. The number is 720-440-7900.
Is a lack of intimacy at home starting to affect your performance on the course? There are many factors like high blood pressure, diabetes, and high cholesterol that may be contributing to your erectile dysfunction. Get back in the game with one visit to Rocky Mountain Men's Clinic, offering same-day solutions for all erectile dysfunction and premature issues. And you get to try the medications containing FDA ingredients right in their office. Let the providers at Rocky Mountain Men's Clinic help you get your confidence back. And be sure to ask about the $99 limited time special. Call today.
This is Face Off. So you look at me, and I'll give you a minute. Give me your best argument. Who's the Broncos MVP for the year?
Wade Phillips. Can we include the coaching staff?
Sure. You got it.
I thought, they didn't make
Steve
a ton
Antonopoulos, the trainer.
I think it is Wade. And I thought the biggest acquisition, and they didn't make a whole lot of them last year. They didn't make the big splashes like they had in previous years with John Elway. I thought was acquiring Wade Phillips. And it's largely the same roster that Jack Del Rio worked with last year. Maybe some better health than the last couple of years. But they played a handful of games with half their secondary, with Darian Stewart and TJ Ward out. Maintained a fairly high, level of play. And this has been the best defense that I've seen in Denver. And you go back a couple years before I do, but I do think this is the best Broncos defense I've seen. So I would go Wade Phillips. And his Thursday press conferences are always entertaining as well.
I saw him and you're kind of stretching the point, because the most valuable players MVP, most valuable person. I'll let you do that. I saw Wade. He tries to escape and go, and we've been friends for a long time. And I said, "Congratulations, old man." He said, "You're a year older than me." and he looked at me and he said, "Woody, every game has been like this all year long." And he was laughing. He said, "There are no breathers." And I said, "Well, you had Green Bay." He said, "You don't breathe easy when you got Aaron Rodgers on the field." So he was right that even though the defense has played well and finished number one, overall, which has never happened in the history of the Broncos, against the run, against the pass, on third downs, all the other stuff. I'm going to go way, way out of here. I think they're number candidates. I mean, Demaryius Thomas, as much grief as he's gotten, you look at his numbers, they're gaudy again, even with the drops. He had kind of a Brandon Marshall kind of year for me. You could say Peyton Manning, because he did lead them to 10 victories, or 8 victories out of their 12. I think you could make a case for Emmanuel Sanders offensively, kind of was the glue for a lot of the games for this year. I think you could say Brandon Marshall. You could say Von Miller came up with big plays. Chris Harris, shutdown corner. Talib, Pro Bowler. Matt Paradis. I wrote a column about him in training camp.
I remember.
Out of the world. He was signed to a futures at this time last year. He had been a draft pick, but he was released and was on the practice squad, but he signed to a future contract. He was the only offensive lineman that played every snap this year. And we thought at the beginning of the year he was going to get bowled over all the time. He actually was calling the offensive line signals. He had guys all around him that were different guys every week. And not because I wrote about him, not because I think he's a nice kid, from Montana, someplace like that. North Dakota, one of those places. Idaho. A rookie starting at center with Peyton Manning behind you, with offensive linemen changing, coming and going and all over the place. He played every snap. He wasn't destroyed in the middle. The pressure came from the outside, so it was not coming up the middle very much. I think he might be the unsung most valuable player of this team. And I don't know how many people will agree with me.
You don't hear his name very often, and that's a good thing.
That's the best. It's like a referee. Broncos, the Football Outsiders, Pro Football Focus and Football Outsiders, interesting looks at it. They rank this as the 8th best defense, this current one that you just talked about because of Wade Phillips, as the 8th best defense since 1989. Don't ask me why, and I threw this in, don't ask me why 1989. Is that true? Do they belong in the top 10 defenses of the last, I think it was the last 25 years or so?
I think they're the 9th best. Seahawks twice, the Ravens. No, I would say that they're, it's kind of arbitrary, but I would say they're one of the best 10 that I've seen. Certainly, they remind me a great deal of Seattle 2 years ago. And while I know that's fresh on our mind, what reminds me the most is their personality. And I wrote about that today, where when we were in New Jersey for that week prior to the Super Bowl, it was one of the most combustible, entertaining, live locker rooms that I've been around, with Michael Bennett and Richard Sherman and all those guys. They were these big personalities. And you see that at Dove Valley with Antonio Smith. He has a kung fu thing. He has a samurai sword over his locker. Von Miller has his chicken farm. Talib's a loose cannon. We know that.
T.J. Ward.
T.J. Ward's a wild man. Derek Wolfe is a wild man. So I think you have a certain identity on the defensive side. I haven't discovered what the identity is yet on the offense, and we're 17 weeks in. So I do think that this team, or this defense, compares favorably to Seattle's.
I wouldn't put it above Seattle's. And it's been number one all year long. The only thing it really doesn't rank number one in is points allowed, and that kind of slipped with Pittsburgh and even San Diego. And I think maybe Carolina was number one, or the Jets or somebody at the end of the season. Having watched the 77 defense, that had an identity. It had a leader in Randy Gradishar. It had wild guys like Tom Jackson, Bob Swinson. I mean, Blau Alzado. There's never been a wilder guy. That was a more cohesive group. They had been together for 3 or 4 years. That was back before they were free agents. So they were depending on guys that they drafted. They were either drafted number 1 through number 6, or free agents off the street like Bob Swinson, one of the best free agents they've ever had in the history of the franchise. And I think I heard from one of the players of today say, we can't be better than that defense because we haven't gone to the Super Bowl yet. So Orange Crush, not because I named it, but because it did go to the Super Bowl. I think the Bill Romanowski defenses that did win Super Bowls because Romanowski was a leader. He was a leader, and I'm going to say something that's not going to sound kind of. He was the only white guy on the defense starting, and yet he was the man on defense. Romanowski. This team still doesn't have that presence. They have an identity. You're talking about it. They have guys that, Chris Harris Jr. is one of the nicest guys in the world, and he's a guy who wants to take on Antonio Brown, even if he loses to him. But I would put them behind the Seahawks. I would put them behind that Raiders. The Ravens defense that won a Super Bowl in 2001, was it? I think that the 85. I go back further. I would say this is probably in the top 5 during this decade.
Wow.
And I think if you can say that, that's saying a lot.
And, this is something I looked up back in week 14, it was, that this defense has had to account for its own offense. And what I mean by that was this defense's starting field position was 28th in the NFL. And there hasn't been a defense since the Ravens in 2000 that was ranked number 1 and had worse field position to start with. So it's had to overcome quite a bit. The Cleveland game, it stood up and pushed them back when you needed that field goal.
5 returns for
yes.
That may include the punt return, but 5 returns for touchdowns.
And needed all of them.
Yeah, and that was almost a signature victory when you think about it. That goes back to the first game of the year, that they beat Baltimore 19-13, I think. And it was the same kind of deal. Where a very close game, and there was an interception at the end. It made a difference, a knockdown. But we saw that in San Diego. We saw that in Oakland. This was sort of that's what Wade Phillips said. It was sort of that the defense would bail out the offense. Cooney Lexus of Greenwood Village is Colorado's #1 volume Lexus dealer, conveniently located at I-25 in Bellevue. But let me tell you what's more important than that. My last Lexus came from Cooney Lexus. I have 2 Lexuses. I don't know if that's the proper way of putting it. If you don't drive a Lexus, you're making a mistake. Never had a moment's problem. You won't with a Lexus. But if you want service, if you want quality, if you want people, you want Greg Stone standing in front of the waterfall there, Cooney Lexus at greenwoodvillage.com.
Hello, my name is Greg Stone, President and General Manager, and I would like to personally thank you for making Cooney Lexus of Greenwood Village the #1 Lexus dealer in Colorado.
Cooney Lexus of Greenwood Village for exceptional customer service and world-class amenities. Take in the beauty of the Rocky Mountains from our rooftop patio. Relax while enjoying a movie in our premium theater. This is the ultimate luxury car buying experience. Visit Cooney Lexus of Greenwood Village or Cooney Lexus of Colorado Springs. Click CooneyLexus.com.
This is a sports show. It's presented by the Denver Post and also today by the Colorado Springs Gazette. Because Paul Klee, their outstanding young columnist, is joining us all the way from 6 blocks away. You cover Denver teams mostly.
Yes, I do.
It's
easier to live up here.
Mostly the Denver Broncos.
This is my home,
yeah.
yes.
So Paul has been a guest here before, and he's joining us. Mark Kiz is probably off skiing today and rethinking his position that Brock Osweiler should be the starter in the first playoff game. I can promise you that Gary Kubiak's not going to listen to Gary Kubiak or me or you. He is going to listen to only 2 people, himself and John Elway. And I'm going to throw out this question. I want to ask a question. Forgive me, Dane, because I asked this of Kiz off the air yesterday. Who do you think is really going to make the decision of who the quarterback is? This is a question that has not been asked yet. Is John Elway going to make the decision? Or is Gary Kubiak going to make the decision? Because let me preface that by saying John Elway's the guy that is going to say to Peyton, thank you, see you around. But he's also going to have to be the guy to decide whether Brock Osweiler is going to be the quarterback of the future here, or Trevor Siemian, or some McCowan brother, or Drew Brees, or Matt Stafford, or whatever. Who's going to make the decision?
I wanted to ask you that question because you would know better than I do. I felt like these 3 weeks in January, and I include last Sunday, or 2 days ago as well, that was going to determine whether Brock Osweiler was going to be the quarterback here next season, and for many more seasons. I didn't think it was those previous 5 games that he started. I think they wanted to see what he would do in these types of situations in January, and if he had the makeup about him to handle playoff type situations. He certainly did against Cincinnati. He certainly did against the Patriots, both games at home. But now I have to believe that going back to that initial press conference when Gary Kubiak was reintroduced here, and there was that feeling of familiarity and friendship and how they were going to combine forces, John Elway and Gary Kubiak. I think this is one of those questions, Woody, that it's both of them. I really do. And then it comes back to Kubiak with the final answer, but you have to think John Elway has a say in this.
That is probably the best answer, but it's a non-answer. Yeah, really, because I agree with you that John Elway and Gary Kubiak are sitting down, even as we speak, and talking about that. I think Greg Knapp is part of the conversation. I think Rick Dixon part of the conversation. That John Elway, who has been with Gary Kubiak all those years, even when they were apart, that he's going to say, here's what I believe. And he said, but you are the coach. I'm going to take you back now. I don't think you were here. Mark Kisler and I were talking about this, and Jeff Legwald. I don't still know to this day who made the decision to start Tebow in the playoff game. There were rumors that Brady Quinn was going to start that game. There was dispute and debate out there, and we don't know. Mark's talked to his sources. I've talked to my sources. I want to talk to people that are now in Chicago, and we have talked to them before. I think as we get further away from that, we'll find out, because there was sentiment out there, great sentiment, to start Brady Quinn in the playoff game against the Steelers.
Wow.
So who made the final decision there to start Tebow? According to what I've been told, John Fox made the final decision, even though there was some informational aspects provided by the general manager and Adam Gase, and Mike McCoy was still here, I think, at that point. Maybe he was gone. I think that John Elway is going to give a strong opinion. I think John Elway is going to tell him to start Brock Osweiler. I think Gary Kubiak is bound and determined to start Peyton Manning.
It's very interesting. I think the one thing that we could probably agree on is that announcement doesn't need to be made.
Oh.
There's no reason to let whoever it is they play know until they walk out on the field.
And see, they are, because they've been doing it. They're probably going to tell everybody Thursday or Friday, and I think that's the biggest mistake of all.
Absolutely.
Is to just not let the press watch practice. You don't have to you can let the photogs come out and get an opportunity to take pictures of both of them. They can let you come out there and watch them do calisthenics. I think if I'm the Denver Broncos, and I'll take you back at some point off the air or whatever to 1977, the Broncos do not have to tell anybody. And if I'm them, I don't. We'll take a news break with Molly Hughes and continue with Paul Klee of the Colorado Springs Gazette.
Hello, I'm Molly Hughes in the Denver Post newsroom. It's being called an eyesore at one of Denver's prized destinations. And now we learn that eyesore is going to be there a lot longer than expected. We're talking about a project at Denver's Confluence Park. The $4.2 million renovation calls for replacing the plaza and the trail ramps to improve accessibility. Workers have closed off that area to foot and bike traffic near REI for more than 6 months now. And now we learn Denver's Department of Parks and Rec says it has hit a snag that will delay the project for several more months. Excavators working on the project have discovered coal tar buried on the banks of the South Platte River. They say the tar is a byproduct from coal that was buried there more than 100 years ago. Site managers say that coal tar itself is not dangerous, but the removal process needs to be handled with extra care so it doesn't seep into the river as it's being excavated. In addition to causing time delays, the discovery of the contaminants is also expected to bust the budget. So Denver Parks and Rec is reevaluating its original plans and may be forced to modify the design as a result. The city says it will publicize the final plan this month, with construction resuming after excavation is completed, likely sometime in the spring or summer.
So you guys learned something you didn't know today. This is the Sports Show with Paul Klee sitting in as my co-host today from the Colorado Springs Gazette, columnist down there. If you haven't read his stuff, it's pretty easy to go. You can find him at Paul Klee on Twitter, and you can find me at the gas station after this program. I'm Woody Paige, columnist for the Denver Post, talent for ESPN and Von Vibot. And now we're being joined by somebody who's going to describe who and what he is.
My name is Hugh Johnson. I'm a digital sports producer with the Denver Post, wishing you a happy new year. And this is what's trending now. Got to do the dab.
See, he's
done
going to
this
have his.
before.
He's now going to take over me. The next time you're back here, he'll be
I can't
the
pull
host.
that off.
What do we got trending in the Denver Post?
All right, guys. New New York Times story coming out today about the Al Jazeera report, of course, surrounding the
HGH and
HGH,
Peyton
the
Manning
band
and his wife.
Right, Peyton Manning and his wife. Guys, Charles Sly was the person that Al Jazeera quoted as a source to this story. He's since recanted. Guys, just want to get your take on the whole situation. Do you still think he's a credible source? What are your thoughts on that?
Al Jazeera's reporter has said they now have a second source. They're not
Right.
going to reveal who that is. Well, I don't know whether to trust them or not. There are a lot of people, and I've read their reports over the years. They have been very accurate in a lot of the reporting in regard to Middle East issues. Do they really know as much about professional football as they do about Middle Eastern problems? I don't think so. I think this is a reporter who's got some information from the outside looking for something. I don't believe it. I know Peyton. I've known him since he was a kid. I talked to him during the course of this. I talked to him again on Sunday. I talked to him. I knew something about the kind of treatment he was getting. I agreed not to report it. It's not illegal what he's doing. He didn't cut corners. I will say this to you, there are other athletes that actually leave the country and go and get blood kind of transfusions done. It's in the centrifugal, where they put nutrients in there. Peyton Manning didn't take human growth hormones. Look at his body. His body didn't increase in mass or anything. In fact, this year, he looked younger and smaller than I've ever seen him. That is a total BS report. I can say that. That's what my belief is. Your thoughts?
Well, you know far better than I do in this. I don't want to be too personal, but I have seen Peyton in the locker room without his pads on, and I don't know that HGH should be illegal. We want these guys to be gladiators and monster athletic robots. I don't have a problem with it, and maybe there's something wrong with me. I'm always skeptical of athletes when it comes to PED use because we have seen so much of it. I would be stunned if Peyton Manning did. I also watched the Al Jazeera report itself online. It's 48 minutes long. Peyton Manning doesn't surface until 40 minutes in. That is burying the lead like I've never seen before. If you have someone saying Peyton Manning used HGH, that goes right at the top because you want to keep them there, I would think. But they may know better than I, so I don't.
No, or they don't know what they're doing.
I don't believe it.
I would just add to it that I tend to agree with you, but here's where I have it's illegal to get human growth hormone from most public sources. Baseball players were getting it from elderly people in nursing homes. It's got to be legal for people, and it is legal. I mean, I've had a rotator cuff, and I'm not an athlete, but cortisone has some sort of steroid in it, so we don't even know whether Peyton's taking cortisone shots during all this time. So, I mean, there's some gray lines there. I think that there should be more examinations just like they're doing with concussions.
All right. Moving on to the divisional round of the playoffs. Guys, the Broncos could face the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Kansas City Chiefs. Both teams are red hot. Or the Houston Texans. NFL.com has the Broncos listed as the AFC team most likely to be one and done. Wanted to get your guys' response to that.
Well, that might be based on history. They were one and done last year. They were one and done against the Baltimore Ravens, which, as Paul mentioned earlier, was probably the best team they've ever had during this era of Peyton Manning. And they did win at home against a bad San Diego team and a New England team that I think was better than it is this year. It's quite possible. They lost to Kansas City. They lost to Pittsburgh. They beat Houston.
Right.
People tend to forget they beat Houston in Seattle this year. They beat them in exhibition games. I think they can beat Houston. If you're a Broncos fan, you're pulling for somebody, you pull for Houston. They got J.J. Watt, but they got no quarterback. That offense is not great. That would be the team that would be the easiest. I think next easiest would be Kansas City. I think that they know how to beat Kansas City, that Kansas City would be a low-scoring game. Alex Smith would not be throwing 3 touchdown passes. The toughest team for them to pace is the team they lost to a couple of weeks ago. That's Pittsburgh. That one does scare me.
Right.
That's one they could lose.
I think this weekend Colorado roots for the home teams. I think you want Cincinnati to win, and you want Houston to win, because you'd much rather play Brian Hoyer than even Alex Smith or Big Ben. And I think the team you want to avoid, and this goes against everything I believe when it comes to the AFC West, is actually Kansas City. Because I think they have a formula that matches up very well against what the Broncos do.
And they have a great coach.
And they have a great coach, a guy that took a lot of the blame for that Week 2 loss over in Kansas City by handing it off to Jamal Charles. But I do think that's the team you want to avoid, and I think you root for the home teams this weekend.
And you know what, just to add to that, Hugh, is this has been shaping up that was going to be the game.
Right.
Once they started going on that run and they got about 5 games into it, everybody's thinking, people were thinking they could win the division. Then it got to be, hey, they could win the division, you could not be in the playoffs. But that was the game that's been looming all along. 2 games have been looming. Broncos going to New England and the Broncos playing Kansas City here.
We'll see what happens, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Who are you? I'm sorry.
I'm Hugh Johnson, a digital sports producer with the Denver Post. You can find me on Twitter @HughJohnsonDP, and that was What's Trending Now.
And all of our live guests, and I presume they fit into that category, are brought to you by Papa John's. Order today. We're talking about Peyton Manning. Well, his number's 18. Order the Papa John's Broncos 18 special. And you know that Peyton Manning's kind of involved with Papa John's. That's 2 large, 3-topping pizzas. Think about that. 2 pizzas, 3 toppings for $18 using the promo code online, Broncos18. So go online, Broncos18, get yourself 2 pizzas tonight at the new papajohns.com.
For our Players' Choice Pizzas, we made the NFL players' favorite pizzas. Now you can eat like an NFL player.
If I can eat like a football player, I can talk like one, I can work out like one, I can even dress like one.
Look, you can eat the pizza. You just can't steal my shorts.
Up your game with any large specialty pizza, including Players' Choice Pizzas. Only $12 each.
Better ingredients, better pizza
Better football.
at the new papajohns.com.
Paul, this is when we do 4 on the floor. You get 30 seconds, I get 30 seconds. When you hear the bell ring, if you don't hear it, you're okay. When you hear the bell ring, shut up. 4 questions in 4 minutes. Brought to you by Citywide Bank. Kubiak or Fox? Who'd you rather have in a playoff game as coach?
Right now, I do think it's Gary Kubiak. I wrote about this today, actually, so I'm glad you brought this up. If you lose your quarterback, both tackles, 2 left tackles, Sambrailo and Ryan Clady, and your leading pass rusher at the time, DeMarcus Ware, and you still win 12 games and earn the number 1 seed, if you're Bill Belichick, you're probably runner-up coach of the year. I do think, and I know where you come down on this, I do think how they've managed to keep this together with everything that has gone on has been very impressive to me.
In 2012, the Broncos went into the Super Bowl with 7 or 8 defensive players who'd been starters. I'm talking about Chris Harris and Raheem Moore, whatever you think of Raheem Moore, he was starting safety. They were missing guys all over the line and everything. So as much grief as John Fox got, particularly for me, and his conservative mode, Gary Kubiak's just as conservative. I think that the question would be, would you rather have Adam Gase as the offensive coordinator or as the coach, or Wade Phillips as the defensive coordinator? Because I don't think Adam Gase would ever hired Wade Phillips. So I am not. I read some today that I think there may be some truth in. I think Kubiak is like Wade Phillips. He's a great offensive coordinator. I'll put it that way. Mike Shanahan, will he get another head coaching job? He's already interviewed with Miami. He's going to interview with Cleveland, Miami. He's got a second interview coming up with Miami. Does he get one? Does he deserve one? He had 4 or 5 smells last year.
Sure. Why not? My question with this is always, why would you want to get back into coaching? If I have a home here in Denver, I'm probably going to spend more time in the mountains if I'm not coaching anymore. But that's me. I think so. He's certainly maybe the most qualified out there with a couple of Super Bowl rings. Sure, give him a shot.
I talked to him on a regular basis. I know he wants to get back into coaching. I know he would like to get it back into coaching into one of 2 spots. San Diego or Miami. What do they have in common? Warm weather sites, particularly San Diego, you could get back. Mike McCoy looks like he's going to keep his job. I think he would take the Miami job in a moment. I think he would not go to Cleveland unless they guaranteed him they were going to acquire a quarterback, a Bradford, somebody like that he could work with. I don't think he liked working with RG3. I think that's been proven. He actually wanted Kirk Cousins. I think he'll promise whatever team that he can bring his son as his offensive coordinator. I think he won't get a job. I think when it's all, I think he's mellowed. I think he knows what to tell, but I just don't. I think people don't want to touch him after what happened in Washington. Third question, Adam Gase. He is going to get a job. There's no doubt in my mind. San Francisco's going to go back to him and say, we made a mistake. Would you rethink this? And he's going to go, nope. I think, but Adam Gase could end up in Miami. I think they would like him to work with Tannehill and see if he couldn't bring out what he's brought out of Jay Cutler this year. He helped himself being with a team that wasn't any good because he said he can do it. He can actually make quarterbacks other than Peyton Manning good. Brock Osweiler's probably helped him. People know he worked with him. Adam Gase is going to get a job. If I'm San Francisco, I go, hey, we apologize. Let's get it right this time.
I think Adam is one of the sharpest individuals that I've been around. He reminds me a great deal of the guy coaching the Celtics right now, in that when you put Brad Stevens in any room, he's the smartest guy in that room. And Adam is a really sharp individual. When he came back shortly before the season, before Troy Tulowitzki was traded, he actually was hanging out with Tulo quite a bit over at Coors Field and picking his brain on different things. He applies different ideas and takes different things from guys. He spends a lot of time with Coach Saban at Alabama, obviously, because he went with him from Michigan State to LSU. I would hire him in a second. I would have hired him last year if you had the opportunity, and they did have the chance. I think that Indianapolis would have been an awesome fit with that quarterback that they have, but obviously that's not going to happen now.
Chip Kelly to Boulder. Speaking of coaches, quarterbacks, and stuff like that, would you, if you were the athletic director up there, would you get rid of the coach and hire Chip Kelly?
Oh, yeah.
Make the big gamble.
100%, yes, because you're relevant just like that. From the moment you introduce him, you're relevant in the Pac-12 and nationally. I don't think that's a place Chip Kelly would go, would be the thing. I think you'd really have to pay for him, and I don't know that CU's in a position to pay what he would command.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Mm-hmm. They have for want of a better term, they have a sugar daddy. Mm-hmm. They once had a sugar daddy, Jack Vickers, put together on the hockey franchise with him. Mm-hmm. And he wanted Chuck Fairbanks as a coach, who was coaching New England Patriots, and he said to the people at CU, I will give you the money to get Chuck Fairbanks. They have a guy that was mentored by Jack Vickers. I think if he says, and I need to call him, if he says, I want Chip Kelly, I'll give you the money. Now, if that's what you think would be the problem here, I think it might be more the academic situation of how difficult it is, because I think it was a lot easier to get players into Oregon than it is at CU. But I think if Chip Kelly wants to say, hey, he actually was a small school kind of guy, I think you could talk him into coming here and he would change the landscape, because the one thing they never had in making the move was a Pac-12 quarterback. And they don't really have a scheme that works in the Pac-12. Citywide Banks, a family-owned, Colorado-focused business bank with 12 locations across Denver and Boulder, over 25 services that businesses need, and a passionate support of over 150 Colorado charities each year. Bank where we bank, Citywide Banks.
I am Citywide Banks.
I am Citywide Banks.
At Citywide Banks,
we put you first by exceeding your service expectations every day.
Every day.
This is a sports show. It's presented by the Denver Post. Paul Klee from the Colorado Springs Gazette. And it's very easy to read him online or tweet him. And he appears on all these shows. He's like the Hermione Gingle. That's an old world reference. She used to be on every talk show late at night because she was interesting. And we're going now to Madison's Mailbag. It used to be called Woody's, but she's taken over Madison Faulkner. And what do you got for us, Madison?
All right, so we have two wonderful tweets today. The first one is from Gary Euclid, and he wants to know if Peyton Manning catches lightning in a bottle and Denver wins the Super Bowl, do you see a scenario where he returns next year?
I don't. I think that that's going to sail very soon. And I think he may be in that corner as well as wanting to play somewhere else for his final season. I don't think Peyton Manning is finished. Woody, you know better than anybody because of how long you've known him. But I think you're going to see Peyton Manning elsewhere next season playing.
Yeah. If they win the Super Bowl, he's gone. He's retiring. He's accomplished everything he wants to do. He'll take the tie in regular season victories. If they don't win the Super Bowl, I think he will entertain. He's through here. Mm-hmm. Anybody that doubts that, John Elway, I don't mean to be cruel about this. John Elway and Kubiak don't want to deal with that again. And people talk about Drew Brees coming here. John Elway doesn't want to go with the third Manning brother, and that's basically what he is. They're going to go a different way. Trevor Siemian, Brock Osweiler, a new draft choice that they get, a veteran quarterback who can kind of in transition for a year help Brock Osweiler. If it were the right situation, Peyton Manning, I think, healthy, because he told me the other day, I said, tell me exactly when this broke down. I said, you don't talk about it. He said, I tore it in Indianapolis. It was bothering me since training camp. He said, I dealt with it, but he said it tore it in Indianapolis. That's why I should have played Kansas City game. I think he wants to be totally happy, healthy and happy. I don't think that combination can happen anywhere except Houston. And that, because they're close enough, and it's indoors. So that's the one place I think he can go. He's not going to go to Cleveland, even though his best friend is the owner there, one of his best friends. He's not going to Tennessee. They have a quarterback. So that's the answer.
Perfect. And then, so the last tweet we have picked for today's mailbag is from Jamie and Connie, and they want to know, looking back on the Broncos season, what are the best and worst plays that stand out?
Oh, that is a great question. Go ahead, Paul.
The only thing I know about this postseason, it's going to be decided by a touchdown or less, because that's how 9 of their wins have come. The one that sticks with me, it's the reason the Broncos are playing at home next week is because of a span of 9 seconds in Kansas City. It went from a 7-point deficit to a 7-point lead in just 9 seconds, which is really remarkable that a 17-game season can come down to that. It was the Peyton Manning to Emmanuel Sanders touchdown pass, and shortly after it was the Brandon Marshall strip and Bradley Roby running into the end zone with the ball.
Worst play of the year, and people say it's not a shank, it's a hook, but it was a bad field goal. They were able to overcome it, but that could have ruined the entire season. That was the worst play of the year, but they got the field goal. The best play of the year, I was thinking about that Emmanuel Sanders when Peyton was struggling and he got that, it was like a 76-yard touchdown. It was longer than the one on Sunday. I think the season would have died without Chris Harris's interception in San Diego. And that sort of epitomized, I think, everything of the season was us seeing even Shiloh intercepting a pass. That the best plays of the year were all these, but there must have been 10 interceptions that actually led, if not immediately, to scores, and that included Talib getting like 3 early in the season, Chris Harris coming up with a couple, Brandon Marshall intercepting a pass. So I have to narrow it down to like 8 or 10 plays.
I thought you might say the Talib Ipoke in Indianapolis being the
Yeah,
worst.
well, he still hadn't told me. He told me he was pushing against his head. So. Thank you, Madison.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Cooney Lexus of Greenwood Village is Colorado's #1 volume Lexus dealer, conveniently located at I-20. Go over there. I even asked Greg Stone, I think it's a great place to go and take a date because they have pool tables, they have a movie theater, they have lattes, they have snacks, they have all sorts of games you can play. So I said, how late are you open on Friday night, Greg? And he said, 9 o'clock. I said, okay. People come over there. They have a nice date. That's where you take your date. You can look at Lexus, and then you go over to Landmark and hang out and drink some beer or something. Cooney Lexus.
Hello, my name is Greg Stone, President and General Manager, and I would like to personally thank you for making Cooney Lexus of Greenwood Village the #1 Lexus dealer in Colorado.
Cooney Lexus of Greenwood Village. For exceptional customer service and world-class amenities, take in the beauty of the Rocky Mountains from our rooftop patio. Relax while enjoying a movie in our premium theater. This is the ultimate luxury car buying experience. Visit Cooney Lexus of Greenwood Village or Cooney Lexus of Colorado Springs. Click CooneyLexus.com.
We've talked so much about the Broncos on the sports show with Paul Klee. We're going to just sway for just a moment. And there was an important critical achievement last night. The Avalanche had a player score his 600th goal, and the question is whether or not that gets you into the Hall of Fame. 600 goals.
It sounds like a lot of goals to me. How many columns do you think you've written in your career?
200 a year times 40, what would that be? I don't know.
8,000.
8,000. Yeah.
So this might be the hockey,
Sounds like
hockey
feels like
equivalent
8,000.
of your column writing.
Well, 600 home runs used to get you into the, automatically got you into the Hall of Fame. Still does, unless you're on steroids. The Hockey Hall of Fame is not as exclusive as the Baseball Hall of Fame. It's more exclusive than the Basketball Hall of Fame, which puts everybody in. So it's somewhere between the Football Hall of Fame and the Baseball Hall of Fame, I would say. Yes. Yeah. I think based on what I've seen that does last night, 4-1 win over the Kings, and only 19 players have accomplished in the history of the league. I would think that gets you in the Hall of Fame.
You have to think his reputation as well helps.
Last night, the Avs, I was looking at comparing the Nuggets and the Avs, and I looked at the Avs and I went, hell, they're only like a half game out of the playoffs, and they had lost like 3 out of 4 now. Do they look like a playoff team to you?
I looked at the standings this morning after the win last night, and the only pause I have is I'm not sure they're better than any of the 8 teams ahead of them. They're not better than Minnesota, Chicago, St. Louis, Nashville, Dallas, Phoenix, but they have a chance because of their guy in goal. And if Varley gets hot, I think they can ride him, which he is right now.
Yeah.
And the way he's playing right now, I think that you see that in a clubhouse, in a locker room. You see when a goaltender is rolling like that, it affects everybody. So sure, they've got a chance. I just don't know that they're one of the best teams in the West.
Yes. I'm just going to say they're a playoff team. I still have faith in Patrick Waugh. He's going to figure it out. He is. I used the word earlier. He's creative. He pulls his goaltender early 2 years ago, and that really spurred them on. He has made changes to his #1 line. He has tried to do something defensively. I think that I was wrong about Varley. I wanted them to get rid of him. I think Patrick Waugh has found the key to him and turned it back on. Is whatever he said or whatever he did or whatever trick he pulled or whatever he saw that was a flaw in the 6-hole or the 4-hole or whatever, I think he's solved that. Varley's a mind case. And so I think Wahoo is a mind case to solve that. So yes, I'm going to say they're in the playoffs. How important is Barry to this team? He had 2 goals and 2 assists last night. You don't think of him as one of the top players, but I'm going to take this first. I thought he was great in the playoffs 2 years ago. That he was really helpful. And I thought last year he was a good player. I thought they were going to get rid of him, and I like him. He's solid. I'm not going to use that term they use in hockey. But I like his attitude. I like his father. I like what he does for this team. He is not the star, but he's a guy that comes to work every day.
Well, we're going to use personal reasons there because you like his dad. I like him because he goes to the same bar that I do over by Wash Park, the Tavern and the Agave Taco Shop. I thought when they lost him a couple of years ago in that series, I thought that turned things. And I think you saw his value, even though that was a long time ago, in that their power play when he was off the ice was abysmal, and it was ineffective. So I do think he's a very gifted athlete, and he's someone that gives them some punch on the power play. And yeah, he's critical. Hopefully he's around here a while.
Papa John's today is the special Broncos 18. Oh, yeah. Forget about that one for a moment. They have the Avalanche. After the Avalanche win, they won last night. You can order Papa John's online and get the Avalanche special. So go online, look for either the Broncos 18 or the Avalanche special. We don't get to say it much. It's like the Nuggets special. So take advantage of it today, all day long, all night long. The Avalanche special at papajohns.com. The new Papa
When
John's.
the Avs win, you win at Papa John's. All season long, the day after every Avs win, you get 50% off your regular menu price online order at papajohns.com by entering promo code AVS. That's right. Just enter promo code AVS online at papajohns.com the day after every Avs win for 50% off your entire online order.
Better ingredients, better pizza, Papa John's.
We're going to finish the show, the sports show, with Paul Klee from the Colorado Gazette, our outstanding young columnist there. So if you haven't read his work, you do. He's somebody I have great respect for in the tradition of very good columnists in Colorado, and there have been a number of them, and I'm not one of them. We end today's show with 6 teams the Broncos don't want to face in the postseason. You made an allusion earlier. You alluded to the team you don't think they want to play, but go through, and we have them up there, but you kind of, because you're a rookie for doing co-hosting, you kind of did it backwards. So we'll explain. He's going to do number 1 at the top.
Mm-hmm. The team that they don't want to play the most, I think, is Kansas City. And I've never believed, I haven't believed in the Chiefs in a while because they haven't given us a reason to believe. And the quarterback doesn't worry me. The offense doesn't worry me. Jamal Charles and Jeremy Maclin, Jamal Charles being out, Jeremy Maclin doesn't worry me. But that defense is a problem because it plays to the Broncos' greatest weakness, and that's on the offensive line. Whether it's Brock Osweiler or Peyton Manning back there, Tamba Hali and Justin Houston would be a problem. So they're number 1
and
for
Houston's
me.
coming back from injury problems that have really limited him. Okay, so they're the team that
you just don't want to play.
Okay, if you go through the others a little quicker.
Okay, you bet. Carolina would be the second because I think they're awfully good, but you're not going to play them until February. Seattle would be third because I can't shake New Jersey from 2 years ago. Still, Cincinnati would be fourth because sometimes you don't want to play a team that you've already beat, and the way they beat them, that would make me nervous. Arizona, obviously not till February. Pittsburgh, I don't think they would worry me quite as much as they worry others, just because of what Chris Harris has said and Aqib Talib has said, that they want another shot at them. And when this defense has a chip on its shoulder, it often plays well.
Okay, I'm going to finish it, and I'm going to go in the correct order. I think that worked out well, though. Number 6 is Arizona. And you and I have a lot of similarities here. I think Arizona, I've been on Arizona since the beginning of the season. I thought they were a legitimate Super Bowl team. They still are. They're a team that, despite losing to Seattle at home, that's going to give you a little pause, but if it came to it, they would get Seattle back in Arizona, and it's just what you said. That would be... I think everybody'd be happy if they could think they were going to play Arizona. That's a team that would be a good Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Number 5, New England. I don't have them higher on the list. You don't have them on your list at all. Nobody ever wants to play New England. I don't care if they got everybody that looks like they came out of the Gone with the Wind after Atlanta was bombed, fire set to Atlanta, and there was walking wounded everywhere. That's New England. You don't want. I don't care where it is, what day it is, what time it is. Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels and Tom Brady can figure out some way that's going to something that's odd that nobody's ever seen before. Kansas City. I think they'd like to play Kansas City. Kansas City's beaten them and should have beaten them. That's almost like they're 0-2 against Kansas City, so you would think they'd rise up at home to actually play one good game. I think that would be a meaningful game for Peyton Manning, since that was the most stunk up the joint kind of game he's ever had because he's injured. Next on my list would be Pittsburgh. I don't think they want any part of Pittsburgh. To me, Pittsburgh is a team that really has a great chance to go to the Super Bowl. I think they can beat anybody. Number 2, Carolina. Yeah, well, they would play them in the Super Bowl. I don't think they could beat Carolina in the Super Bowl. And number 1, Seattle. I don't think they want any part of Seattle. I think that would be sort of like it was 2 years ago, that you might think, you're sitting out there saying, the players really want to see if they can get revenge against Seattle. No, they don't. They don't want to do that. Hey, thanks for being with us today, Paul Klee. You'll come back and join us. Mark Kisler will be back with us tomorrow. I'm Woody Paige. This is Denver Post. This is the Sports Show, and this is Molly Hughes with the news.
Hello, I'm Molly Hughes in the Denver Post newsroom with news of a nurse being arrested for allegedly sexually assaulting numerous patients. Thomas Moore is accused of touching several women who were under his care in hospitals and emergency rooms. He was arrested on December 21st on charges of unlawful sexual contact. Investigators in Larimer County believe there could be more victims. The 43-year-old nurse has worked in multiple medical centers in Colorado since 2008, including North Colorado Medical Center in Greeley, Greeley Emergency Center, McKee Medical Center in Loveland, Poudre Valley Hospital, North Suburban Medical Center in Thornton, and Medical Center of the Rockies in Loveland. Investigators are asking anyone who may have been a victim contact investigators or Crime Stoppers of Larimer County. Those phone numbers are listed at the bottom of the attached news story.